I got to my mom's house and I started to get more information about what had happened. I still didn't know why, but basically the girls were down in the Tano Basin, and they were on a truck called a Unimog, and they crossed the water. I think they had crossed the water earlier in the day when the water was lower, and there's just a creek there that will fill up with water when there's storm rain or like flow from snow melting, I think, causes the water levels to rise. This specific time that they went across, the truck actually got stuck, and I don't know if it was like a sinkhole or just the turbulence in the water, but they weren't able to keep moving forward, and the truck started going down. And there were 7 kids on the truck, and 3 of those children ended up dying that day. And the truck started filling up with water, the cab did, and I wasn't there, so it's hard to know all the details, but I know that the kids kind of just had to go for it and hope for the best. My nephew at the time was the one who helped Lakin out. He was probably like 12 years old. And Sawyer, I think, got lucky and hit some sand that stopped her body. But there was no one helping her. When all this happened, I would have said that I had a strong faith. I felt like I had a really good relationship with Jesus, and all of that changed really fast. It's hard to imagine something like this happening. I think as a parent, every parent probably contemplates what it would be like heaven forbid, if my kid ran out in front of that car. Like, what would that be like? And you don't ever think it's going to happen to you. And when it does, it's like that trust that I had in Jesus. It's like it kind of got ripped away from me real fast, like a Band-Aid. Like, everything I thought to be true, I wasn't sure anymore. I didn't ever feel like there was no God, but I was mad. I was angry. None of it made sense. Why would God allow my children to suffer what they'd suffered and then lose another child, and then just to see my other 2 struggling the way that they were and are? Just doesn't seem right. I started to question if I was being punished. I questioned, like, why did Austin die and the other 2 survive? I was really in just a place where I needed God more than anything. But I wasn't really sure what's God's purpose if all this horrible stuff was happening to someone who, like, really trusted in the Lord. To this day, I still have moments where I really question why all this happened and what was the purpose. And I sat in that initial anger for a while. I was angry at people and angry at bad decisions. I was angry with myself because I think part of grieving is like putting blame somewhere, and when you don't know who else to blame, you throw it on yourself maybe. I thought crazy things like, if I hadn't made a trip to go to Florida, maybe I could have saved them. Like, you start to do things in your head that just really don't make any sense. I struggled with that anger pretty intensely for several months. And it was like a cycle. And I would feel really, really awful. And I knew that I couldn't sit in that anger because it was like destroying me, like from the inside out. It was just like eating me up. And like unforgiveness. I mean, I was just harboring unforgiveness and anger. And I didn't trust people. I didn't trust God. I just had a lot of things going on that were not positive. And I've done a lot of hard work to get out of that hole. And it didn't happen passively. It was hard work, and I'm still not done with it. I have moments where just recently I was up on a ladder doing something. I was painting something in the house on the wall, and I just lost it. It just comes out of nowhere, and I can get really angry really fast. And I have to remember that there's not always answers for these things, and I probably won't have answers to a lot of my questions until I'm on the other side of this life. And that part of it hasn't really gotten easier, but I definitely, I have moved on from that really dark hole of doubt and anger. After going through this tragedy, my prayer life drastically increased. I would say that was my biggest weakness in my spiritual life before this happened. And now I don't even realize I'm praying a lot of the times because I'm just talking to God like, hey, show up because I'm about to have a come apart. I mean, at work, I'm like talking to myself and I'm actually praying, and I pray in the car. I pray out loud. Sometimes I'm yelling in my prayers, and it's something that I never would have imagined doing. I would pray for peace in my mind. Initially, I had so much torment in my mind. Like, I still would run the thought of Austin struggling in that water through my mind on a loop, and I couldn't stop. And I would pray for God to just give me some peace. I couldn't sleep. I prayed for Lakin and Sawyer. I think I've probably prayed more for Lakin and Sawyer and their hearts and their minds, and just all the heaviness that came with this for them, which just doesn't seem fair that they have to carry this with them forever. I pray for them all the time that they just keep the path and keep trusting the Lord, because this life is really hard without Jesus. And I've actually prayed a lot for the other family involved, because I know how much this just sucks, and I can't imagine carrying around the weight of all this and losing 2 children. And it's hard to pray for people you're mad at. It was really hard in the beginning, but over time and hard work, it's gotten easier. When all this happened, I was really, really desperate for the truth of the gospel to be real. I've never been someone to question the gospel as much as I did when all this happened. I don't think I ever felt like I wanted to run from God, but I was really doubting if God was who he says he is. I needed him to show up and give me some reassurance, and sometimes that didn't happen. But I just knew that running the other way was not going to help. I wanted to know that Austin was in heaven, and I wanted to know she was okay. But that was probably the biggest struggle when all this happened, was just questioning the truth of the gospel. Like, I've never questioned so many things in my life as I did when all of this happened and my child was gone from this earth. God has really shown up in ways, very unexpected ways, since all of this started happening. As soon as we landed in Phoenix and I got that phone call and I was told the words that Austin's body has been recovered, the word recovered is never a good word. That's like they're searching for a dead body, and that's exactly what they found. And those words brought the most peace to me in a moment that was simultaneously the worst moment of my entire life, but also one of the most peaceful moments. And I don't really know how to explain that other than God. Like, those loops of her suffering just immediately shut off, and I just felt some sort of reassurance. It was sort of like an out-of-body experience, being on the plane and just knowing that God was with her and God was with me in that moment, and that somehow this was all going to be okay. Since this event, God has really shown up in such unique ways, and I feel like our family has really grown in our faith. And there's been really low moments where I'm on the struggle bus big time, and I've literally called out to God out loud, saying, please give me something. Show me you are who you say you are. And I genuinely feel like he's responded. I mean, there's been multiple occasions where I get smacked in the face and reminded that, like, I have not been alone ever in this whole journey. That doesn't mean it's not hard, but I've got someone walking it with me. And I know that I've seen that in the girls' lives as well. And the year after all this happened, Lakin actually wanted to get baptized, and that was such a celebration. To see that she still trusted God despite everything that happened, and she still doesn't understand. Just like I don't understand why Austin's gone, but just to see that and to see her make that choice on her own, and then to have her sister Sawyer follow suit the next year, has been such a blessing in our family. To see God showing up, and we keep going towards him and not away. We've had a lot of people that wanted to help us in this time. There were definitely moments where people wanted to help, and sometimes the help wasn't so helpful. And there were definitely words that weren't super helpful. But some of the worst things that I experienced were people bad-mouthing my abilities to, why would you have let your kids do something like that? I mean, people that didn't really even know what happened. That was really destructive. Just people making remarks and comments and things that really had no idea what had happened or who I was or anything about us. I also had even close people wanting to tell me that, like, God must have needed Austin back. And I don't know why, but that, to me, gosh, that one really sucks, because you have someone telling you God needed my 5-year-old little girl to somehow accomplish something he couldn't do on his own, which takes away from the power of God, and also it just is not helpful to say things like that. And I know everyone's intentions are good, and you kind of have to filter through those things. But the most helpful things were people that would just sit with me and just be. They weren't there to fix me, because you can't really fix this. And they weren't there to offer like suggestions or tips on how to survive grief after losing a child. And everyone's situation is different. Other people that have lost children's situation's different than mine, and I don't think I would want to offer them my 2 cents. So just being with someone and listening. And another thing that's super helpful is like some of my dearest friends would come over and pray with me. I didn't ask them to. They just said, hey girl, I'm coming over. I'm going to sit with you. Because they knew I was alone and the girls were with their dad that weekend or whatever, and they knew that I probably was in a pretty cruddy place, and they would just come and pray with me and wouldn't ask, because I probably would have said no. But it made the world of difference just to have that friend there to put their hand on me and pray for me, and I didn't know how much I needed it. But I really did. We as a family received an amazing amount of support from people. We had not only family stepping in to help out with things, but I had actually just joined a new small group, a couple weeks prior to this happening. And you would have thought that that small group had been a part of my life for years. They swooped in like little angels, and they had meals at my door for absurd amount of people, because there were people everywhere at my house. And I mean, they just took care of us like we were their own family. And that right there is the power of being in community. And there were small groups all over our area that were dropping care packages off and gift cards and groceries, and people brought us meals for months. I was a single mom at the time, and just the thought of putting dinner on the table every night was kind of a daunting thought. There were times where I didn't eat for days, and I'm like, I still have to feed my children. But thankfully, there was a multitude of people rallied around us and just supported us like crazy. And complete strangers stepped in to do things that I just never would have imagined. And that right there is community. And I love that about our church. So my perspective of God has changed quite a bit since this happened. Like I said, I had a good relationship with Christ before any of this bad stuff happened. But now I look at Christ as like the only way to do this life. I think before, I'm not proud to say this, he was like an accessory. And it was just like, oh yeah, God's there when I need him. And when you get knocked down that hard and you can't really do anything on your own anymore, and you truly surrender and just say, God, I can't do this without you. Like, I now look at God as the only way to get through every day. I'm not relying on how much sleep I got last night, or how much counseling I've done this month. Like, if I don't go to Jesus first every day, things aren't going well for me. And I immediately go, oh yeah, I didn't start with my scripture this morning. So I went from God being an accessory in my life to God being like the pinnacle, where he should be, in the forefront of everything I do every day. And that doesn't mean I'm some like perfect Christ follower, but like I am so dependent on Christ now that it's just night and day difference, like before and now, how I look at my relationship with God. It's hard to sit with the fact that, I had 3 living children one day, and then the next day I had 2. I don't know why Austin was the one that died. I don't know why Lakin and Sawyer were saved. I truly believe that it's a miracle that Lakin and Sawyer are okay physically. Sawyer and Austin are twins, and it's kind of a blessing and a curse. the blessing is I get to look at Sawyer every day. And she reminds me of her twin sister. And I have this little mirror of what Austin's life may have looked like. It's definitely a struggle. We struggle a lot around holidays and birthdays. Birthdays are rough for Sawyer because we're celebrating Sawyer still, but also mourning the fact that Austin's not getting any older. So that's hard to process, and it's a struggle for sure, but I'm so blessed that Lakin and Sawyer are here today, and we just try and honor her sister as much as possible, their sister as much as possible. But I don't think on this side of heaven I'll ever understand why Austin was the one. So as a mother, I have these two beautiful girls still with me that I am raising, and losing Austin has definitely changed the way that I love Lakin and Sawyer, and it has changed the way that I view my duties as a mom. And there's a scripture I always think about when I think about, like, how should I be raising my kids and how should I be loving them, and it comes from Psalm 127, and it talks about children are like arrows in a quiver. And this might sound silly, but I feel like every mom should feel this way, because we are really important characters that play a role in our kids' lives. And I picture myself as a warrior, because every day is like a battle sometimes. And I think of having my little arrows, my children, in my quiver, and that my goal as a mom is to lead them up to follow Christ and to ultimately hit that target. And that target is eternity. And that target is also to share the love of God with other people. And if I can instill that in them and keep them on that path, that's more important to me than anything. It's not what I'm going to buy them for Christmas or how much they like me at the end of the day after we've gotten through all our homeschool work, because that doesn't always go great. But I want to send them off from my quiver, and I want them to hit that target. And that is the best way I know how to love them. And I also, the day of Thanksgiving, I was at my mom's and we all had dinner, and after supper we were just sitting at the table talking, and there was lots of people there, and Austin was never really known to be super cuddly. She was a big lover, but she was not super cuddly. And she came up to me in front of all of our family, and she said, "Mommy, can you please hold me like a baby?" And I did. And I held her like a baby. Like, I cradled her at the dinner table. And she just laid there for a long time. And she told me how much she loved me. And I told her back. And what a blessing that was. And that night, before I went to bed, I put the girls to bed knowing that I was going to leave really early the next morning, and I knew that I wanted to send them off in a good way. And I went in and I prayed with the three of them in bed. They were all sleeping right next to each other in a queen-size bed at my mom's, and I laid down with them and I prayed with them, and I prayed that they would have a wonderful time, and I prayed that they would know how much God loves them and how much I love them. Another really huge blessing that we had that time, because that was the last time. The last thing I did with Austin was prayed. And I didn't even go in there the next morning to kiss him goodbye, because I didn't want to wake them, because it was really early. But it was just such a gift knowing that the last thing that I did with Austin was I prayed with her. So about maybe 8 months ago, Ashley preached a message on forgiveness. And I mean, we talk about forgiveness all the time at church. It's a huge part of our faith, and it's a huge part of life. And I've heard several messages, since all this happened on forgiveness. But something in that message, it really got to me. And thank God it did. He actually told us in the message to go home and write down everything that this person, or whoever the person is that you can't forgive, did to you or took from you. And so I did. And he told us to take our communion home. And he said to make a list. And that list was long. And I made that list. I spent a long time on that list, and I wrote everything down. And I took my communion. And I released those individuals. And I released myself at the same time. And I had been working on this unforgiveness for a year and a half in counseling. I had been doing things, I'd been praying, I had been back and forth, and I thought that maybe I had forgiven them, and I truly don't think that I had until that message. I had gotten over some hurdle that I couldn't get over, and I will forever be grateful for that. And I actually got the opportunity to go to the trial that those two individuals were involved in. The state had pressed charges, and I wanted to go so I could say what I wanted to say. I felt like I needed to go and speak, and I was able, because of that message and because of the steps I took to get to that point, I was able to go in front of the courtroom and say, I forgive you, to their faces. And it was empowering for me. It was so good to be able to do that out loud, not just in my head, not just to Christ, not just in my prayers, to say, I forgive them. I forgive them. I truly do. And it doesn't mean that I don't ever have weird feelings or have that anger creep in. That's something that I feel like I do every day. Forgiveness is a process, and I don't think it just happens and then we don't have to worry about it anymore. It doesn't work like that. It's still a fight, but I feel it, and I know that I'm in a good place with that unforgiveness now. It can be really hard to look at a situation like this, or look at, your life story and say, oh, I have to find something good that came from my child dying. That just seems wrong. And it's definitely something that I completely would be like, heck no, I haven't seen anything good come from that. But years later, I can truly say that my relationship with Christ has grown exponentially in the last 2.5 years. Every day is hard. As you can see with all the tears, it doesn't really get easier. But I have learned to rely on Christ so much more now. When I lost Austin, it felt like I lost a limb. I'm forever going to walk with a limp. It's never going to go back. And for now, I have to learn how to do life without her. But the good that came from it is I can now lead my children better. I'm confident in my faith. I speak more freely to other people about my faith. I'm not ever ashamed to talk to people about how much I love God and that I trust Him. And I think it's impacted not just my girls, but my husband and our older kids. And I've just seen a lot of good things in a way that, like, I view Christ in the way maybe other people around me view Christ through all this pain. It's never easy to think that the death of your child brings good. But when you see people's lives changed and when you see your own life change for the better, you have to see some good there.